Hello, my name is Judy. Welcome to The Liberated Multitasker. I have a recipe I just have to share with you. It's homemade hamburger buns. I found it on Pinterest. It was hot dog buns, and I thought, well, if it's good for hot dogs, it ought to be good for hamburgers too. And we absolutely love it. I got tired of going to the grocery store and buying buns on Wednesday or Thursday, and by the weekend when we decided to grill out, they were stale. And I'll tell you now, my family loves them, and they don't want to buy the store-bought. They want Mama to make the homemade buns. So come along, and I'll show you just how easy it is to make your own hamburger or hot dog buns. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is add in our yeast. This is 2 1/4 teaspoons or 1 packet of active dry yeast. We're also going to add a 1/2 cup of flour. I'm using all-purpose flour. And 1 cup of warm water. I'm going to whisk this together. You want to whisk it till it's smooth. And then you're going to let it stand for 10 to 15 minutes, just until it's good and foamy. I think that ought to be good, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes. So now it's time to whisk in an egg. I have 1 farm fresh egg, 3 tablespoons of melted butter, 3 tablespoons of sugar. I'm using organic cane sugar. And 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt. I'm using Redmond's real salt. Well, and then it didn't want to come out. And we're going to whisk this together. That looks good. And so now I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add that a little at a time. I'm using organic, unbleached. You just use whatever you have. I'm going to do a little bit at a time. You can do this in your KitchenAid mixer. I like doing it by hand, and then when it comes to kneading the dough, I will put it in my KitchenAid and let it do that work. There's the rest of my flour. This is just really the simplest recipe, and it is so good. Now what I like to do is I like to make them up, and then once they completely cool, I will bag them up and freeze them. So we just had, this past weekend, one of my children's birthdays, and she wanted hamburgers with homemade buns, and I actually had them already in the freezer cooked. So anytime I use those up, I like to go ahead and make another batch to have in the freezer so we can have them ready to go. Now, if you want to make them that day, that is not a problem. If you're eating around say let's say 5:30, 6 o'clock, you'll want to start this about 2 o'clock because it's going to have to rise. And then once it cooks, you want to let it at least cool for about 20 minutes before you cut the buns in half. All right, so I think this is incorporated enough that it's time to put it in the KitchenAid and let it knead. So I'll bring you right back so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so I have my dough hook on my KitchenAid. I'm going to use a dough scraper and make sure I get all this in the bowl. Hopefully without making a mess. I'll lock this in place. And we're going to let this knead for 5 to 6 minutes. And it's going to be, we want to do this on low. So I'm going to start it off on speed 1. And if I think it needs to go up a notch, I'll take it to 2. But I think 1 will be fine. Okay, let's see how this looks. I say that's looking pretty good. It has cleaned the sides of the bowl. I'll show you in just a second. Now I'm going to go ahead and move this KitchenAid out of the way. We're done with this. Do you see how clean that is? So now I'm going to flour this counter. It's clean. I'm going to work this into a dough ball. And that's all you're doing is just kind of tucking those ends under, getting that tension on the top. I think that looks good. Now I'm going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil in my bowl. It says about a teaspoon. I'm not measuring. I'm going to take this and then I roll it in here. I want to make sure the top and the bottom's covered, get all the sides, and I'm just going to leave it in there. So now I'm going to cover this with saran wrap. I'm going to put it in a warm place and let it double in size. Now my instructions say about 2 hours. How long it takes to double in size is going to depend on how warm it is in your house. So I'll bring you back then. Okay, so let's take a look at the dough. And it's doubled in size. It's taken it about an hour and a half. You do not have to measure anything out. But because I'm that person, I want to see how much it weighs because I like for my buns to be about equal. So I'm going to want to see how much this is in grams. And it's 872, so 8 buns is going to be 109 grams per bun. That's what I'm going to look for. There. Now I'm going to cut this in half again to get an idea. You can eyeball this. These are just so good. So we just shape them, you cut them in equal parts, and then just tuck those edges under to help create that tension on the top. And that's all it is. We take some melted butter and slather it on top and let them rise for another 45 minutes or until they double. So we'll put this butter around the tops and sides. Now, after about 30 minutes, I'm going to preheat my oven to 375 degrees. Okay, so I'll bring you back after they have risen. Okay, so these have doubled in size. So we're going to put them in our oven at 375 for 20 to 25 minutes. So now it's time to pull the hamburger buns out of the oven. They roast some more while they were in the oven. So I have about a tablespoon of melted butter left over, and I'm going to cover the tops of the buns with this butter. Then I'm going to get them onto the cooling rack. You want them to cool for about 20 minutes before you slice them open. Aren't those gorgeous? And they taste so good. So let's take a look to see what they look like when we cook them. Now what I'll do after these completely cool, I will freeze them. I'll bag them and freeze them so I'll have a convenience food when I need it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like, share, and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.